So I'm just going to introduce Josh Ellis. He will be moderating the panel. He's a recent graduate of Ole Miss, graduated in 2008. And so this will be a panel on launching a new magazine. So you can go ahead and get started.
Hi, everybody. I am Josh Ellis. I am an Ole Miss grad. And I'm glad to be here. It's interesting that for this panel, I was picked to host it. I was just telling Marshal a minute ago, I've never hosted a panel, so this will be interesting. And I especially don't know anything about launching a new magazine, so I'll be learning just as much as you are. I'm glad to see so many students here because you're really the right audience for this topic. I think most of the professionals and older people who are here with us, either your magazine's already off the ground or you've been through launches before and you know what to expect, but students really are the ones with the passion and energy and creative ideas and very little to lose. So you make great candidates to hear this message out and maybe make the magazine of your dreams come true someday. And I think that my background working at Success is particularly helpful here because we're a magazine for entrepreneurs. And if you are not familiar with Success, it's probably because it's fairly new. Our first issue was only published in 1897, but it has shut down and been sold and reopened and launched again many new times. Our parent company just bought the magazine in 2007, and as you will find when you are getting ready to launch your magazine, you're going to have plenty of naysayers. So when Success was bought, there was a story in the New York Times about it, and I have a quote here. Someone said, this was after a few rounds of openings and closings, someone said, the Chinese have a saying that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result every time, is the definition of insanity. 10 years later, we're still going, but Samir, appreciate the support. Dr. Husni is around here somewhere? Yes. You were wrong. You were wrong on this one, but I'm glad. So let me introduce our panelists then. We have Steve Viksjo. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, very good.
Co-founder, creative director of Jarry. We have Nicole Bowman, the founder of Bowman Circulation Marketing. Joe Berger. Berger.
That's
excuse
okay.
me. That was the easy one.
You get Viksjo right and mix up Berger.
Publisher's marketing and sales consultant at Joe Berger and Associates. We have Jennifer Reeder, VP of Sales at Democrat Printing. We have Bryan Welch, the founder of Be the Change Media, and Marshal McKinney, design director of Garden and Gun. So,
I'd like to point out we might have printed the first issue of Success. We've been around since 1871.
All right, good. It's good to have some legacy here. You guys have been open the whole time, right?
Yes.
Okay. So,
except on some Sundays.
Fair enough. Like Chick-fil-A. Who doesn't love Chick-fil-A? All right. So, as someone whose specialty is content, like I said, I don't really know the first thing about the tactical side of publishing. So let's start with a softball instead for getting a magazine off the ground, and that is who is the right type of person to lead the charge in starting a magazine for anyone?
Well, certainly an entrepreneur. I would think somebody who has the vision, somebody who has the dream, somebody who really has the drive. It's not easy. Opening any business is not easy, but magazines today are morphing. And so you have to play to the core, your core audience. And somebody who's done the research, knows their core audience, knows how they intend to reach that audience is somebody that should be looking to start a magazine today.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. You want to be brave, a little bit crazy, but you also have to be willing to do the homework. And you also have to manage your expectations. So, I mean, you may really want to break even that first time out of the ball, first issue out, but it probably won't happen, and you have to be willing to accept that it won't happen, but keep going.
Right, and you have to be aware of the challenges. and optimistic, but also realistic. Like we've been hearing, people love to say print is dead, and it would be so easy to be like, well, I'm never going to start a print magazine. But you have to be smart about the ways that you listen to that, why some print has failed, but also, not just fall into the, there are easier things to launch, so I could do that, but just to question, someone who can question and say, well, why do some fail, and how can I do it differently?
I think I would question part of that premise, just because I can't name a single enthusiast media brand that has been successful in digital only.
Right.
In the enthusiast category, where almost everybody here would be thinking about launching a magazine, if you don't have either events or a print product or both, there's no way to monetize in an enthusiast media brand.
I agree.
The digital media are of no use to you in monetizing that business. And so I was really kind of astonished in the earlier panel that he asked, okay, why not digital? And everybody said, because I love print. I don't even read print. But I can't monetize a business that doesn't have either event, some kind of physical asset to monetize, not in an enthusiast category. And I've launched 4 successful magazine brands and 1 catastrophe, which was more of a better learning experience than the 4 successes. A much worse experience, but a better learning experience.
If we talk about some of the traits that you need to get into this, where do you all rank patience? Because there are a lot of boxes that need to be checked, and it's something that, although you may have in your mind's eye what this magazine should be, within 2 months' time, you're probably still not ready to go to press on the first issue, right? You need some time to really think about it and talk to people and check all those boxes before you're ready to go.
It's a huge lead time from idea to going to print. I mean, the fellow earlier was talking about the launch of the magazine. They only had 90 days, I think, they had 6 months to discuss the idea and then 90 days to go to print for
Magnolia.
For Magnolia, yeah.
I would contend that's why
yeah.
they were probably successful.
It could be.
Because otherwise you get this analysis by paralysis and you're just, reverse that.
But they're a huge company and they have all these touch points they can go to. If you're a small independent, you can't get to a distributor. You can't get to a printer. You don't have all those contacts, and you have to make all those contacts. So you need to be able to find somebody who will print you, to find somebody who will do your pre-press, to find someone who will distribute you. All of those contacts you have to find.
Maybe we could redefine. I don't think patience is an asset at all in any way, shape, or form, but stubbornness, hell of an asset.
Right.
Right.
If you're going to give up the first time one of your expectations it doesn't come true, then yeah, you have no chance of success. But if you're not banging on doors and yelling at people and yelling at yourself and miserable all the time, then you're not going to be successful either.
Right. Like I'd say it's like not rushing to the point that you're not doing everything you need to do, but patience feels like you're not being active enough either.
We generally come to the table after that fact. It's now a concept. There's a vision. My recommendation, as that concept is starting to come together, is to work with a Samir, Dr. Husney, who can really guide you and introduce you to some of the right people and really put you on the right track and discuss your fears. That's one of my biggest things, is everyone wants to talk about their hopes and dreams. I would prefer to hear about what keeps you up at night, because those are the things that I can help fix.
Well, let me pitch this to Joe then. Joe, you're a consultant, more on the newsstand side than sort of the total view of things like Samir, but help is something that anyone who's launching a magazine is going to need. So what can someone like yourself, how can you help a prospective launchee on the ramp up to launch, and what are some of the things that you can't do for them?
One thing, there's a lot of things I can do, and many people in our business can do the same thing, which is we can arrange for where your magazine is going to wind up once it leaves the wholesaler's warehouse. And we can take care of everything. We can get you in touch with Jen, and she can print you a beautiful magazine, and then she and I can help you get to the appropriate traffic people to get it to the right places, and it winds up on there. But then after that, once it's on the stands, we can't actually stand there and guide people who are walking by and saying, here, you want this magazine. This is the magazine you want to buy. We can't do that. And it would be very nice if you as the publisher would maybe ask me to give you some input on what might make the cover appeal to the person who walks by. Oddly enough, as it was mentioned earlier, a lot of publishers don't like to let us in on that for some reason. The big thing, though, it really is like I said earlier, is to manage your expectations and to be realistic about what could happen. And when the results are not exactly what you were expecting, to be willing to, again, do the homework and go back and say, why did this happen? Why did this come out this way? What are some of the things we think happened here? And how can we make this work better in the future? And I just want to add, there was a lot of discussion earlier on the distribution panel in talking about newsstand. And you have to realize when it comes to newsstand that all of the challenges that are happening today in newsstand are pretty much the results of consolidation of retailers into large national retail operations. The industry itself has consolidated that way. That's all pretty natural. That's what happens in economics. That's what happens in capitalism. And we can rail about it and we can be angry about something that somebody did back in 2003. But at the end of the day, it's 2017 and we've got magazines to sell. And this is the system we have, and this is how it works. And when I work with my clients, my big thing with them is, how are we going to sell your next issue? And what sort of things can we do to get people to buy your magazine? And that's the interesting thing, I think. What happened in 2003, I don't really care about anymore.
What is the sort of level of involvement you have in that process then when you say, how can we do this? How does that actually play out? Is it trading PDFs of what a cover might look like?
When I do get involved in cover selection, yeah, we'll go back and forth on that. You know, we know certain things. Certain colors tend to work better than other colors. A certain amount of consistency in what your logo is.
Size,
cover lines, all those sorts of things. But again, at the end of the day, especially in today's retail market, you know, we still have almost the same number of magazines as we had 10 years ago, but we have less space. So you have a little bit less time on the rack sometimes. And it really kind of comes down to, and I still think of, how are we going to let the audience know that the magazine is there and you can go and you can get it and you can get it at these places.
Steve, I think you experienced the most recent launch of anyone up here. So what sort of consultants, be it distribution, newsstand, anything through the process, did you work with?
I think initially we really didn't even think that was an option just because we had so little money. We launched, as Lucas said, on Kickstarter, and we were really happy with the results of that. We made $30,000 from the Kickstarter launch. And then our third co-founder did contribute less than that, but some amount. So we had very limited resources. So I think hiring consultants was like, we didn't even consider it, truthfully. And even now, you know, the magazine is a success in the sense that we continue making one, but we still don't feel, we have to be so careful with our money that we don't, you know, would love the input and like figuring out ways of making a relationship work. But we mainly went to people who, like with Kickstarter, we are in Brooklyn, Kickstarter's in Brooklyn, we knew people at Kickstarter, we sort of sourced through friends who knew somebody, and we spoke to the person who was in charge of like promoting a Kickstarter. So they'll put it on their homepage or they'll somehow help you with that. And Lucas, I think, knew someone and got in front of them, they supported our project, and that helped a little bit. So we had consultants sort of like in the sort of freer sense of like sourcing mentors along the way, and we also we do work with distributors in that sense to actually get the book into newsstands now.
So then being a lean team, I would say that you're fairly able to preserve your vision as you go forward.
Right.
And I want to ask Marshal about this. You told Folio some time back that you and the team envisioned Garden and Gun early on as reaching a taste level to compete with older brands. Can you talk to us about the process of how that vision was arrived at before you came on board and some of those early issues? How did you continue to hone that, because you guys have succeeded?
We wanted to, we aspired to reach a certain taste level. I don't know that we did right out of the gates, but First and foremost, you want to listen to your reader. Your reader's everything. It's the center of your business. And, you want to hold them captive in your mind. And so we took a lot of our design cues and a lot of what we did from who we imagined them to be and who they were telling us they were. And so we kind of built out from there. Gardening gun, by its name, it just sounds like something that's been, like dirty and musty that you pulled out of the attic. So it actually is. If y'all don't know, it's actually named after a gay club that was in Charleston in the 70s and 80s. That became like the Studio 54 of the South, and everybody wanted to go to this club, gay or straight. And so when we named it this, it kind of harkened back to another era. It was already looking kind of backwards to inform who it was. And it sounds kind of like Vanity Fair or Rolling Stone. You don't really know what that means. It just sounds like something. So we have this idea of who our reader are. We have this kind of funny, funky name. And then you're looking at your readership, and you sort of design the content to meet their needs. And we knew it needed to reach a higher taste level. It's just sort of the audience we were working with. And the sweet spot for us was imagining this 50-year-old man who's well-made. Maybe his kids are off to college or about to go to college. He's built a life for himself. Maybe he's landed. But no matter how much money he has, he likes to go down to the fish shack or the barbecue shack and rub elbows, with his people. And southernness, that sense of southernness, is what sort of transcends the whole thing. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or whatever. Your southernness is enough to make you sort of create this sort of egalitarian sort of space. And so we came out of the gates. We had a little bit of financing. We had a little bit of money. And we were able to kind of drill down on an aesthetic that I think that sort of reached a higher taste level. We committed to shooting as much as we could. We never relied on stock photography. We leveraged contacts. You're going to have to do that. Anybody who's starting a magazine, you need to leverage the power of energy, of youth and enthusiasm. And if you build it, they come. These people sort of surround you, and they want to see you make it. They want to get involved. They want to touch it. They want to push it along. They want to push it further down the tracks. And so early on, we had a little bit of money. We had some resources. We were able to sort of draw on our networks, our photographers, our writers, get them inspired to play with us. We couldn't pay great, but try to develop something that looked like it had been around a while. So that's kind of what we did.
So for any of the students especially, a lot of you may not realize it, but you will go on to entrepreneurial careers, whether you start a magazine or you're just a freelance writer or a freelance designer, or you have some small team of 2 or 3 people that do this type of contract work. You are an entrepreneur whether you know it or not, and so I would turn it over to Bryan and Nicole and Joe. You guys founded companies that's slightly different than launching magazines, although I know that you have. Talk to us about the vision required at those early stages of what you want your shop to be.
It was actually called unemployment. My 3rd year anniversary for a consulting company, and the owner called me up and said, "Congratulations on 3 years of service, but we're shutting the company down, and in 2 weeks you'll be out of work." And I was about a month away from getting married, so.
Do something.
Sometimes entrepreneurship is necessity. And, as time and as the industry has changed, my skill set has changed and my outlook on things has changed. And, you start developing relationships with people and other entrepreneurs, or, bumped into Nicole, and that's how you do things.
For me, I worked for a variety of magazines that were sold, so I kept getting, lost in the shuffle, because to the buyer goes they already have a circulation department there, so you don't get to go with the magazine. Some of the editorial people might go with the magazine, but usually the circulation staff does not. So I kept being bumped out of a job as the magazine was acquired by this company or that company. And I kept saying, why am I always the lost one? I always was 100% in. So I decided at that point that I was never going to be 100% in anywhere. And I started my own consulting business, and that's been, I think, about 15 years ago. So it's been great fun since.
I think for me it's a brain chemistry imbalance problem. Meaning and purpose in what you do, feeling a genuine passion for what you're going to do every morning is profoundly addictive for some of us. Some of us, I'm Bryan, I'm an entrepreneur, and I have no control over my addiction.
Hi, Bryan.
Hello, Bryan.
Thank you. Passion is the raw material of the business we're in. And for me, that's the most invigorating thing about it. And sometimes you can be in a business that's owned by people that allow you to pursue your passions, and one thing I like to say is that cash flow is a great deodorant, If you're cash flowing, owners will tend to let you follow your instincts and do your thing. But eventually, you have to, you probably end up in a purely entrepreneurial business operating without a net, because it goes with that sense of meaning and purpose will lead you there. You won't always have somebody willing to shelter you while it happens. For me, one of the things that I was aware of, but until I had one fail, I wasn't fully aware, I guess. And that is when you start an entrepreneurial venture with other people's money that employs a significant number of people, then you have all of those people, investors you respect and who have befriended you and supported you. You have employees who you've worked alongside, probably people you love and respect and care for. And when it fails, they all go down with you. Their money, their jobs, their lives. And I've gone from that kind of failure on to another entrepreneurial venture where the same outcome is entirely possible. You have to really, I think, believe in what you're doing on a level that makes that worth it. But that's not like a job.
So people put a lot of trust in you, but you have to, when you're launching a magazine or starting a business or media company of any kind, you have to put a lot of trust in people. Outside consultants is one thing, but at some juncture, you're not going to be able to design and write the entire magazine yourself. So for the panel, I'll just throw it up there for anyone. And I'd love to hear you guys kicking around maybe some different philosophies on finding the right people who share your vision and passion and who you can trust to bring on board and help out.
Yeah, I mean, that's like enormously important, especially for launching the magazine, is finding out, well, for Lucas and editorial and me and creative, well, who do we work with? Like, who do we want to be part of the book? Whose sensibility matches, our brand that we're creating? When you're launching, the first thing you do is launch the brand. So we built that in January 2015 and didn't have an issue until fall 2015. So the entire time, it's nothing but a brand and an Instagram and other social media platforms, but Instagram's been our biggest. And so through bringing people in, we sort of did it through social media. So we'd sometimes, on Instagram specifically, go through and find artists, or Lucas knew writers he wanted to work with, and you kind of bring them in and get them excited about the magazine, like you were saying too, bring people in, and if they're as excited as you are, they're definitely going to help in any way that they can, and people can help a lot. So the first thing we did was kind of like hand select people we knew we wanted to work with, and then get the ball rolling there. And then they bought the concept and they introduced you to other people. So in terms of artists, it's definitely worked that way. And I know for Lucas, the same has gone with writers.
That's sort of the heroine of the addiction of launching a magazine for me, is that you get all this, it's gonna be the most exciting time of your life. And it's gonna be so fun, and it's gonna be so hard, and it's gonna require so much of yourself to do it. But when you find talent and develop talent and you bring them on and you begin to develop a trust with one another, all of a sudden you feel this momentum kind of coming. Yes, you guys are all up against the challenge of selling ads and creating content that someone wants to buy an ad off of and all that. And I get all that, and it comes with its own headaches. But you never feel more alive than when you're launching this magazine. You're getting out, you're reaching out, and you're starting to find good people. And you need good people. You need good circulation people for sure. Direct marketing people. You can use social media. Social media for art people like us is like it's like the Craigslist of classified. I mean,
It's
you
a
just
constant
go and find,
portfolio stream.
yeah. I mean, you can just find incredible talent, and that part's so exciting. I think.
I'm curious about something though. Can I ask Marshall a question? So I've never understood garden and gun. But one thing I wonder about a garden and gun, or frankly the things I've done as well, is whether people joined it and became passionate about it because of its particular subject matter, which we're kind of implying, or whether there isn't just a group of people who want to be associated with something exciting and new and mission-driven. How much of the appeal is the particular subject matter of garden and gun? I mean, are these people who are just always fascinated with that sliver of Southern culture? Or are they people who were ignited by the spirit of the thing?
I think a little bit of both, but I think you know, if you hold your core reader in your mind, you want to serve them at all costs. You want to inspire them. You want to give them material that causes them to aspire. And want to live whatever this garden gun lifestyle is. You want them to assimilate to it and find a path towards it and in it and through it. We created a garden and gun club so that people could live out the pages. They could go on a quail hunt with a big field feast at the end. They could get together with like-minded people and have a good time. I mean, it's easy to get together and celebrate barbecue and bourbon. I mean, that's easy. Easy reason to get folks together. Eventually, it ran its course. It sort of imploded under its own weight because managing a club is a totally different business than being in the magazine business. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think you give them a healthy dose of those things that they've come to expect, and then you try to surprise them when you can. And you try to bring them in any which way you can. It's very interesting when you start out with a new launch and then you're 10 or 15 years in. The dynamics are changing because you want to be fresh and you want to be vital and you want to inspire these people. But you kind of begin to sort of, because you're going to run out of energy, all you entrepreneurs are going to eventually run out of energy, and you're going to be like, wow, this thing's selling ads now, and it's sort of walking on its own feet. The baby is, you know, what once was a baby that was unwieldy is now kind of becoming a teenager. And that comes with its own set of problems. Because now, what have you done for me lately? You know, are you really just going to feed me more barbecue and bourbon? So it's
that could be a relationship. I don't see. That doesn't fall too short.
It sounds
for me.
It feels.
Yeah.
I discovered garden and gun in Chicago. And so I was definitely part of that latter. It was a culture that I didn't know very much about, but was incredibly intrigued right from the very first issue I picked up.
Good.
You know, the dogs, the food.
Yeah.
I subscribed immediately.
A lot of our readership comes from outside of the South. We get a lot of expats, but we also have a huge readership in California, which I think is like 4th, 5th, 6th largest economy in the world, and then you got New York, and we've got a lot of
Yankees buying.
Yeah, we do, and they're sending us photos of their bourbon get-togethers, or like, hey, we finally got some okra in Brooklyn. let's fry it, and they want to share that with you. So
I think maybe part of what I was driving at is, I launched Farm Collector. I launched Motorcycle Classics. I don't like old tractors. I like ones that work.
Yeah.
And I'm a disaster on a motorcycle. I've tried it, and it's just not my. But I love passion.
Yeah.
I love going to an antique tractor gathering, right? And representing Farm Collector at that gathering, because the people are fired up. Or an antique motorcycle rally, because you're around people who are fired up, and I think it's just great to connect with people on that level.
It is. I agree.
For launching a magazine, it's like, the Garden and Gun brand, if you can tap that community so that they just feel like they want to be, whether it's buying the magazine or just being part of the community, and they know what it is. Like that's what, Kinfolk is another example where they did that so well. It wasn't even just about the magazine. It's like an entire sensibility and lifestyle was created.
Approach,
Content really spoke
methodology.
to the niche.
Right.
And the audience had been looking for something like that, and they found it.
Right.
And it works.
And it makes it easier for them to buy in or know what they
One of
have.
the things I'd say to anyone launching a new magazine is you don't have to crush it on the newsstands because you're not on the newsstands. What you have to crush it at is building mythology around your brand.
Right.
There was a time early on when we did an oyster on the cover. We knew good and well an oyster on the cover wasn't going to sell. I mean, it was beautiful. It was the most beautiful oyster you've ever seen. It was sitting on a bed of ice and had a big smear of sauce, red sauce on it, big dollop smeared on it haphazardly. And people to this day still ask me about that. I love that oyster cover. And I was like, really? Because it tanked. And, but it didn't matter because it builds mythology around your brand. It builds
Identity.
And when you have that, you're developing the passion. That's where the passion comes from. And you can never, ever betray your reader. You can never. I get almost emotional about this. It's sentimental. You can never speak down to them. You've always got to speak up to them, and you've always got to speak to them as if they're, you're interested in them, as if they're your best friend.
I'm militant about this idea that you should be, from day one, editing your magazine with the buyer in mind, not the reader, but the company that's going to buy your magazine. I'm outraged by this idea. I'm deeply offended by the idea. I don't think you can serve two masters. I think the reader is everything, and your relationship with the audience is everything. And if you're managing the magazine with the idea that some private equity firm will eventually pay you a lot of money, and you're trying to manage the magazine and edit the magazine for private equity guys, I'm really not even interested in publishing a magazine for private equity guys, right? And I don't think you can be successful both ways. I think that can be, and clearly there's some very successful people here who have gone about it in that way. But I think it can be a death sentence for a magazine that's driven by real enthusiasm, by a real audience with deep feelings, people you should be serving, rather than some nebulous, prospective buyer at some future date.
I get really frustrated by having been at it now for almost 20 years, and you watch these big corporations come in, and we sat through that yesterday, and it was it was mind-blowing for me and mind-blowingly informative, and getting their perspective on things. But when you come in and you say, I'm going to buy up 10 magazines, and I'm going to fire the editor, and then I'm going to promote the number 2, and then I'm going to get rid of half the art department, and we're going to get out there and we're going to sell ads. Well, that's not going to happen. You just kicked your readership in the crotch and said, this is about how much you mean to me. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. And so,
or at least it's not what we do.
Right.
Maybe it works that way.
Maybe it does work. Maybe it does work.
I was going to say, I do believe it does work in many instances.
Yeah.
I've been involved with quite a few companies that were maybe a 5-8 title publishing company that went on to be 25 titles that actually grew those brands. So I think that...
Well, I did that. I just didn't do it by kicking the readers in the crotch.
But I don't know that you have to do that to...
Good.
To grow as a large company.
If they'll pay us to do it, though, we will kick them in the crotch, for sure.
Well, I think there is that assignment, and it's not an illegitimate strategy in the right setting with the right business. And a business that's on the verge of bankruptcy or is in workout clearly had some major problems before that person arrived. Some crotches needed to be kicked at that point.
But not the audience.
But not the audience.
Not the reader.
Right.
Not the reader.
Right.
Under no circumstances the reader.
Right.
That was interesting
So
yesterday when
restructuring
I
had
asked
to be
what...
had, but not
Yeah.
at the expense of the readership.
I asked
So,
what the
yeah.
hub was, and I know it's the reader. I know the reader's the hub, right? But I want to hear them say that because I don't know that when you're taking over a business or preparing a business to sell or to get maximum value out of it, that you're really thinking about the reader.
Well, that's so one thing being here has been so valuable is that there's so many different grades of magazine, not even grades, there's like different they're completely different products. So being a small, we retail at $20. And so I've heard, magazines say, oh my God, we're so expensive, we're $12. So I'm sitting there being like, oh my God, I'm a $20 magazine. But I think it's because you can't group all magazines together. So when you're saying like, the reader is so important, for us, the reader is everything, because we don't have, like advertising, we need partnerships more. We don't even say advertising, we're like, we need partners to help us print because we're so young and it is so expensive to produce the book. But the truth is you can be, when your model is ours, which is that, we are offering a product, like an object, like Michael said, like we're an object for your home, like you're gonna keep us for a longer period. You don't have to rely on those partners or like cleaning house in that way to cater to advertisers, because our reader is our only source of income, really.
For now.
So everything you do is for them.
And I think there are infinite variations on all of that. And even within one company, I once ran Ogden Publications, and we had Farm Collector, whose annual subscription was $40, had 40,000 loving readers, cash flow positive. And then Mother Earth News had a subscription price of $10 and sold 500,000 copies of each issue, And both of them had a model that worked well for them. But for Farm Collector, there were really only 40,000 people passionate enough to pay $20, but they were passionate enough to pay $40. And so the right business model was to charge those people $40.
Did you have a rate base for Mother Earth News? Is that why you had to do the $10 to get to the rate base?
I actually took a vow, a sacred vow, 20 years ago that I would never, in a professional setting, use the words rate base.
Ah, okay.
Because I think rate base is the dumbest idea ever introduced to the media business.
Agreed.
We have targets.
Did I have targets?
Yeah.
No. No, I had targets for lifetime value. I had targets for cash flow, for profit per reader. I had a lot of targets, but one of them wasn't a circulation number. Because managing to the circulation number ignores what value you are or are not deriving from the audience.
Absolutely.
And especially if you're a circ-driven publisher, what you need to know is how much value are you deriving from each one of those readers when you acquire them or over the lifetime value of that reader. That's what you need to understand. So we had lots of targets we were managing to, but not a circulation number, because I thought that was just incredibly destructive. And, yeah.
It is.
Let's go back a step or two and speak more toward pre-launch before the magazine is available. We've touched on funding a little bit. You mentioned your Kickstarter. You mentioned different seed funding you guys received. This is something I think a lot of people who just have an idea for a magazine, it doesn't occur to them yet, but where do you get money?
Kickstarter is crowdfunding, especially now, people almost go to crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter to find new projects that they just want to be a part of. Or, Kickstarter, we could have launched, or I guess you could say you could launch the idea for a magazine, promote it on social media, and take pre-orders just through your website, and then pay Kickstarter nothing. But crowdfunding sites have a built-in community that allow you to spread your concept to a community that already is looking for one or wants to buy into one or looking for projects to support. So we found Kickstarter really useful. Something that being here and having like a much wider perspective, my eyes have been open thinking like, well, why didn't we pitch to an investor? Like, well, why did we think we only needed $30,000? Why didn't we launch with 200 and maybe we could make a job of it? Because it's a side project for everyone involved, and what could we do with it if it were a full-time job? So I think initially we thought Kickstarter was just like, that's what we're doing. But even lately I've been thinking like, well, really making a go of it, there's more people that you are beholden to, there's more people that it's not just your magazine that could fail anymore. So that's scary, but in terms of people who might be thinking of launching a magazine, I could see there's really something to be said for both routes.
See, for me, it's very simple. Not your printer. Not your printer. We're not gonna fund a startup.
Well, you might if things go the wrong way.
Well, yes, but I meant at the visionary stage.
You funded a little bit of one of mine. Not you personally, but the printer did. Yeah. Can happen.
It has, just
But I think you're right. I mean, you are beholden to other people, and God help you if your idea is good enough to attract venture capital. God help you. Venture capitalists are people who are professionals at building relationships, and they're awfully good at it. And your agreement with your venture capitalist is going to include a path to control. The venture capitalist will have something in the agreement that gives them a way of taking your control away, taking the business away from you. If you're very successful and meet all your targets, that'll never happen. But it's in there. It's always in there. One of my favorite stories about a media startup from 15 years ago. Some of you probably know this story. I won't name the business. But the founder, very bright, young person, she, and I'm going to be a little bit off on the numbers, but pretty close. She got like $1 million from venture capitalists with an agreement that if she met certain targets, they'd give her another $1 million later on. And she missed the targets, so they wouldn't give her the other $1 million. They got 40% of her business for the first $1 million. They were going to get another 40% when they put the second $1 million in. She missed her targets. They wouldn't give her the money. She had to let a bunch of people go, completely reorganize the company. But she managed to turn it around and get it to cash flow about 5 months later. And then a year and a half after that, somebody offered her, if my memory serves, $18 million for the company, which she happily got ready to accept. And then her venture capitalist showed up at the door and took the other 40% for $1 million, because that's the way the contract was written. And that's a cautionary tale. And so basically, she sold a company for $18 million, but the venture capitalist took 40% of it for $1 million right before the sale.
Thoughts for anyone on, I know it's an individual case, but using your own money to start a magazine?
People do it.
I've worked in a magazine.
I've had clients that call up and say, we're starting, and we used to do this, and now we're going to try to do that. And in fact, one client I have is now on their, I've been with them for the whole run, so it's 20 plus years. 3 different owners, but the founder was very successful in his previous career and was an enthusiast about this one particular thing, and it's actually the only magazine that covers that particular activity in the entire country, muskie fishing. And but there is a magazine and a niche for everybody, and the people who do this love this particular sport.
What's the name of the magazine?
Muskie Hunter.
Muskie Hunter, I love that. I was hoping for Muskie Monthly, but I like Hunter.
They should have a cologne.
I wish he was monthly, but it's just. But the founder of the company, he was very successful in what he did, and used his money, started it, and it's been bought by muskie enthusiasts instead of venture capitalists on 3 different occasions.
We, I would say, launch more with personal money than with venture capital or investors. Or if there are investors, they're very small and in the background.
Marshal?
If you can find I've worked at magazines that were started for $7,000, a box of cards with potential advertisers, and guys were just literally punching numbers, calling. And the magazine got going, and it lived on for almost 8 years. And the market told it that it would be better off as a mobile event marketing company than as a magazine. So they did that, and then they've spun that into an ad agency. So, I mean, ideally, you're going to be able to find somebody with some capital who believes in you, and they're going to invest, or you have leveraged some situation, or maybe your parents are rich and kicked you down some money. Whatever the case may be, it's going to take everything you've got to get it off the ground. It's going to take everything you have in you to will the thing to come alive and walk on its own.
If you get other people's money, they'll almost certainly ask you to put in your money.
Yeah.
That's
Or time. But yeah,
usually both, or both. Yeah.
And you likely put in your own, like to fly down here, or to go on a shoot location. Our budgets wouldn't allow for our own travel and all of that. So you'll obviously be putting in some of your own. If you do it at sort of the Kickstarter level, if you don't have a lot of investment, obviously, and set up with like a staff and a income stream set up for yourself, you will obviously be putting in your own money, even if you did like a Kickstarter route. But on that note too, I was just going to bring it into a printing and consulting realm, that even if whatever amount of money it is, like I could see, knowing what we've done on the money we had, when I think about, like, let's say we had $200,000, what would we have done differently? We probably would have set ourselves up with some amount of salary so we could do this more as a full-time job. But then even whatever amount you have, you have to be so frugal. You have to act like, my grandmother's like Depression era mentality of like waste nothing and stretch everything into like 10 meals. Somehow generations later, have that. And so we stretch printing budgets, we stretch everything you could possibly do to do things cheaply. So no matter how much you have, I think it's just a matter of acting like it's nothing and acting like you have no money to spend, so you only spend what you absolutely have to.
I agree. And I'll tell you a little secret about Garden Gun. It started with, I think, it was seeded pretty well, like $12 million. And then the recession hit. And then we came back from Christmas break and I'm sorry, guys, I don't know if we're going to be here another week or not. So we all just sat around and said, well, okay, well, we're just going to keep showing up every day. We're going to be freelancers, and we're just keep coming to this office because we still have the lease on it. So we'll just come every day. And I was me and my photo editor were putting shoots on our credit cards on the promise that the company would somehow find a way forward, or another investor, and pay us back. So I mean, whoever you are and you're launching a new magazine, it's a wild ride, and we've all been, you're not alone, and stay with it.
Your colleague who was curled in a fetal position crying earlier, that's a successful launch. Right?
Yeah, and I think you hit on something earlier. I think for those of you guys who are, I call it you're crafting this magazine experience, and I look at it as a craft. Do print on great paper. Don't skimp. Right. Try to print on the best paper you can afford. Make something that is an object. I think some of the most coveted real estate in the world is the American coffee table, and that's where you want your book to be. And that's how you want it to be presented to the world. You want people to, find partners who will, in stores or wherever, that'll treat it as an object, a desirable object. And you don't want them to throw it in the trash can. You want them to remove it, put it on the shelf, and put the new issue on the coffee table. And there's things like that, approaches like that, I think, that for you guys who are entrepreneurs, be thinking about that way. And don't be afraid to charge a little bit more for the product.
I would absolutely agree with that, with the caveat that don't set yourself up on too heavy, too nice, too expensive of a paper, because if times get tight and you all of a sudden have to pull back from an 80-pound number 2 to a 45-pound number 5, that is going to be a very noticeable change. And your readers are going to see it, your advertisers are certainly going to see it, and you will be perceived, whether truthfully or not, as though you're not successful. And we've seen this happen time and time again. So we actually caution folks on getting too heavy, too nice, too expensive of paper. Find something you like, something you can afford, because you can always make it better. But it's very difficult to bring it back if times change and you need to.
Is Southern Grit here?
Good
Where
Grit.
You at? Good Grit. Sorry. Good Grit. Hey, Good Grit. Yeah, and if you're going to develop ads for your advertisers, maybe tack on a little percentage for doing that, if you can. Yeah, good. There's always be looking for opportunities to increase revenue and create revenue.
I actually think we may be in a new era when it comes to production. I've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars by going from 50 pound to 48.5 pound. I've been there, but our physicality is the thing that separates the magazine publisher today. And if that physicality is sensual, I'm just amazed still how much advertising I can sell when I go in and say we have a print magazine coming out in 3 months that I cannot sell if I say we're at 500,000 uniques. There's more money there, and it is something about the object. And I don't know exactly what it is. We've heard a lot of theories, and there are a lot of very smart people thinking about it. There is something about the physicality of that object that allows us to monetize our stories in an effective way that we cannot do without that physicality. And so it leads me to think, wow, how much leverage could I get out of upgrading the physical experience? And I don't know, I don't know how we even quantify that. But I think I'm feeling differently about it these days.
We do quite, I'm sorry.
You go, please.
We have quite a few that perhaps their monthly magazine is done on a 50-pound grade 4. Looks very nice. They're very happy with it, the readers. But they might do a 13th issue or an annual of some sort that all of a sudden will put on 70-pound. Now it'll have a cover price 3 to 4 times that of the monthly issue. But it gets purchased and is generally oftentimes the same content, perhaps just taken a little bit further. And those kind of yearbook things have been very, very profitable for clients.
Yeah, and we can measure the impact on the newsstand. The thing that nags at me in the back of my mind is, what is the advertiser's real response, visceral response to the physical object? And I don't know of a way of definitively quantifying the value of that answer. I'm suspicious there might be a lot of value there.
We're finding there is. Certainly from our standpoint.
It's like I'm arguing your point, aren't I?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Go back to your earlier point. I mean, people want to own things. That's what it basically
people
comes
want to
down
own things.
to. So, we've got Via Corsa, and he's got all his social media feeds, and he's got the web, and he's got the mobile web, and there's e-commerce and all that.
Television coming.
But this is, you can't forget video anymore. But this is what the person actually shelled out $5.99 for.
Yeah.
And the other stuff they don't own. I mean, it's fun to find it. And there's always the findability issue.
I love it. Ask yourself the question, there's this, 140-page, 2-pound, beautifully produced magazine with a 750,000 rate base that, by the way, loses a bunch of money in Circ. They must, because you can buy 2 years for $2, so that's what Sebastian was just telling me. And it's called Wired, and it's about the digital world. What the hell is that? Why is there a Wired magazine? I can't explain it, but it's clear that there's a lot of value there somehow for advertisers, because they're making a rate base at grotesquely low subscription prices. And so they're making it back on advertising. And their advertisers are all digitarati, right? What is that? Blows my mind.
Let's talk distribution. That's one of the most important questions.
Must we?
Sorry?
Must we?
Yeah, afraid so. Afraid so. That's one of the most important questions that anyone launching a magazine is going to have to ask themselves. Nicole, how do they decide what's the right avenue for them?
Well, for me, it's audience development. I'm on the subscriber side of things. So I come into the picture once you've decided what your vision, your editorial vision is, and you've hired your writers before you printed the magazine, and you tell me who your audience is, and I help you find your audience. So whether you want to go on the newsstand, if you're talking to me, you want to be a subscriber base. So most of my launches have been subscriber based, and I help you find your audience. And usually that's via direct mail. And I know people I've been hearing differing stories, but direct mail is not dead, and it's profitable. All of my people I've worked with are profitable in the mail. And if you're not profitable in the mail, or at least break even, you're not doing it right. We should talk. But it's a great way to do it, and it's of the 10 launches I've done, the 5 who are not in business still, when we discussed who their audience were, they were not clear on that. Yeah. And if you're not clear on who you're trying to serve, then you're not going to be able to find your audience. And so you have an editorial issue. And it certainly panned out that way. So that's how I would help you do that, or one gets there. So,
distribution thoughts for the group?
I think that demographics are evil. I think that anybody who goes into the magazine business with an age range, I know you feel compelled. I'm not trying to criticize anybody in particular. But what you're really trying to do is connect with people about their passions. And if you exclude everybody outside of a 15-year age range, that might be a terrible error. A thing happened to us at Mother Earth News a few years ago when MRI in 2013 finally came out with syndicated research about political self-definition. They asked American readers, do you consider yourselves very liberal, somewhat liberal, neutral, somewhat conservative, very conservative? And the Mother Earth News readers' index for very liberal was 198, which meant that we were twice as likely as the average American to say they were very liberal. The index for very conservative is 199, which means they were twice as likely as the average American to say they were very conservative. Now, we didn't think we were editing the magazine for conservatives. There were no conservatives on the editorial staff. There were no moderate liberals on the editorial staff, if you get my drift. But we'd been following the data and reading the engagement metrics and changing our language and changing our presentation. One of the things that the metrics showed us is we couldn't run pictures of people. When we ran pictures of people, we tanked on the cover, on a story, on the internet. It just always, we thought this is crazy. This is the first thing we learned in journalism school was people, 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 and it was not working for us. Well, what we discovered when we saw this crazy number come out of MRIs, we go back and look at the things that the metrics have taught us to do. Neutralize the tribal language, say sustainable and not green, include frugality, make sure there's a solution in the top of every story about an environmental problem. And so it's driven us toward detribalizing the content of the magazine. And as a result, we accidentally stumbled across this huge audience, 20% of our readership said they were very conservative politically. Only 9% were very liberal. So huge audience that we didn't aim for, we didn't know about, and we would have excluded if we'd had a demographic profile.
If I may segue, you said the word green, which I hear a lot of talk. I get a lot of phone calls wanting sustainable paper, wanting, all the inks to be soy-based. And one thing I'll point out, we've recently learned as an industry, some of the new UV coatings out, the grits, the soft touch, are certainly some of the most caustic materials in a printing plant today.
Doggone it.
Sorry.
Just bad news every time I turn to you.
You might, to continue that train of thought, we heard earlier today as well about the tremendous waste in newsstand distribution, the low sell-throughs and all that. But keep in mind that all those copies that wind up in a shredder get recycled. Pallets get broken down and recycled. There's actually a fair amount of efficiencies in terms of handling those returns in many cases now. But the other thing, too, is I think that the cost of being on the newsstand now also inclines many publishers to try to understand who your audience is, and instead of throwing 500,000 copies out, saying, you know what, I really only need to print maybe 20,000 to try to hit the places that I want to be in. And the other thing, too, is, we see it with independent publications like yours, and $20, you're in great company. I mean, there's some really great indie $20 publications out there that are astoundingly gorgeous and beautifully curated. And instead of trying to get into Walmart or even into Whole Foods, which can be incredibly costly, they instead find their own retailers. There was some discussion about this morning, and and I love it. You go and you look up an indie publisher and you look on their website and they call their retailer stockists. It's like, wow, we're in England again. And that's how you do it. If you don't want to go the traditional route, find your own retailers. There's a lot of ways to do this, and I think it's one of the great things about the market that we're in today.
I love that idea of finding your own retailers. And may I say something potentially controversial?
Please.
Why ask now?
If you're set up economically to make money at a 20% efficiency rate, then push your distributors for bigger distribution and drive your efficiency down to the last place you can make money. Because then you make more money, which means you can do a better thing in the world. If you believe in this thing you're producing, this content, its mission, the people, the readers, then you want to get that information in the hands of as many people as possible. And I'm a total blood and guts, foaming at the mouth environmentalist. But if I can make money at 20%, then I want to drive those distributors to lower my efficiency until I sell that last profitable copy. And I want to cut it off right there. If you study the galleys, if you have good consultants, you can find that number. People, efficiency is kind of like a fetish. Low efficiency is not bad if you get bigger circulation out of it.
In terms of distribution, like if you're launching a magazine, deciding how you want to distribute, we could have used consultants probably in the beginning because a lot of ours has been a little bit of trial and error. And in the beginning, we decided we did not want to work with distributors because it just we didn't understand how it could be profitable. But we did understand how vital it is to getting your magazine out there. And we aren't going to physically find stockists in Berlin, in Taiwan. Like, we're not going to be able to do that ourselves, but a distributor can. And so we kind of went back and forth, ending up deciding to distribute, which a production note required like stickering over the barcode we printed for the one that could actually be used with the distributors. So like learning that stuff in advance of printing is really important, or at least deciding what you're going to do before you get to that printing stage.
Don't shrink your barcode too much, please.
Right. But even then, so we have just then learned from the process of, even though we're such an expensive book, we tried through Ingram going into Barnes & Noble, which we are in our Whole Foods. It's just a matter of learning the number. So realizing how many books you're willing to lose, or how much money you're willing to lose, truthfully, because it's really the distribution model for a book. At our rate is really not, it's just to get it out there. You're not going to make money from it. But then how much you can push distributors, which we're trying to do now, to say, well, look at the numbers. I mean, Barnes & Noble, yes, that's great that you want to increase the number of copies in your stores by 500%, but you keep sending them to the stores that don't buy them, with customers who don't buy them. So we're not going to do that. Like, it does
Talk
require...
to Ingram and do your own distribution.
So that's what we're trying to do now, to be more in charge of like, well, I know we're told you can't really choose your stores, but if you push the right people, exactly,
Talk to your Ingram AE and ask them for a printout, and you can.
That's the point we're at now, too.
And a good newsstand consultant, and even in my biggest companies, I've hired both newsstand consultants and printing contract consultants. Those two, I could never do without those two people. None of us working in our publishing business could ever become expert enough or even develop enough time to go around to all the distributors and wholesalers and go through the galleys and pound on them about the inefficiencies built into it. It's still medieval. I mean, it's unbelievable how poorly the data is being used in distribution today. And without a great consultant who's wading through the data with somebody, it's just super hard to get it, to improve it and to get it right. And the other thing is printing contracts. I mean, I'm highly educated. Printing contracts are nightmarish, and I need an expert beside me to figure out which one's best.
I love working with printers. That's the part that was easy for me because I have a design background. And just again, because we've only lightly touched on printing, but if you're launching a magazine, the right printer will be a real partner and find the inefficiencies in the specs you gave them and say, if you shrink your book by 1/4 of an inch, we can fit more pages on the sheet and dramatically lower your costs.
You're absolutely right. One of the things we specialize in is tabloid titles. And I think we've been very successful. We probably do 70, 80 of them in the plant each month. And most of them started out about 13 and a half inches tall. We put in a new Sunday 4000 that had a limitation for a 24-page signature, but it could only be a 12 and a half inch tall title. So I went to some of my larger clients first and showed them that if they were willing to make a 1/2 an inch change, it was going to save them in excess of, for this one particular account, was $65,000 a year. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for them. They instantly changed, and it made it much more efficient. We were putting in 24s versus 16s, but that was the type of partnership we had with that client.
Right.
And they looked to us for value-added ideas. And really, I think your printer should relish those conversations with the client. You should be in front of your people, showing them new ideas, or at least discussing, an ad, something that they're trying to achieve. Perhaps it's a blow-in. Any of those sort of things. I mean, I like to say there's nothing we can't do. I won't promise it'll be cheap or fast, but there's nothing we can't do. And sometimes it's just a matter of tweaking it a little bit, and it can become cheap and fast.
Right. Like the best printers will say, well, this is the option you gave me, this is how much it costs. but here are some slight tweaks that we can make.
That's exactly how they should be operating.
And so in our experience, we realized that our cover sheet, we had flaps originally, which are crazy expensive, and you should never decide on doing that. But we were really trying to hit that $20 price point and make the book feel like it was worth it. We since have dropped those, but we wanted to use that space on the sheet because if you don't, that's just, why would you ever trim your book and leave any amount of paper unused, because that's just a waste of paper. So we now print bookmarks that are inserted in every issue, and we sell ad space on the back of that bookmark, and it's extremely valuable space because we make it a keepsake for the reader by having the ad also be something that doesn't feel like an ad. So for us, we usually work with a partner to develop a recipe and get an illustrator to do some beautiful illustration component, so it feels like a keepsake bookmark.
We do that as well.
But you could print business cards on the sheet or anything.
This is often off of the cover stock, and then we'll blow it in somewhere in the magazine for $1.50, $1,000. And it really adds a lot of value, and they're selling, I don't know what they're selling them for, but a lot more than $1.50, $1,000.
So we traded notes before today and answering some of the questions that we were going to deal with on the panel. And Jennifer, you had one of my favorite responses, and that was to make a splash with your first issue. And so we've answered the distribution questions and printing, and we know what our vision is, and we've even hired a few people to work with us. We've even secured a little funding. How do we make a splash with the first issue? What are some ways that we've all seen this done well? Well,
again, if I were I would speak with Joe, people like him. He has the background. He knows he has the data as to what people are picking up on the newsstand. And so if I really wanted to make a splash with my first issue, I may think a Dayglow pink is going to really sell my brand. And he may tell me I'm crazy. Am I crazy?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Depends on your readers.
That's right. And so, again, it's so important to have mentors, have consultants, have people who have done this before you to help you get there. And I do think making a splash with your first issue is very important because the success of that is going to help drive advertising sales. It's going to help all across the board. And if I may, real quickly, one thing that we seem to see a lot as a printer is people will run out and hire a designer, and because they've done a lot of design. If they've done a lot of design for the internet, you're going to want to probably talk to another designer that's done a lot of print design, because some of the files we see, they're just, no, I'm sorry, we don't have a 14-unit press to do these. All of these different PMS colors that you're calling for, or whatever the case may be. And it's something that's evolving. We're all moving to an HTML format. We'll be there perhaps in the next 2 months. I'm sure the industry will be there in the next 6. And that in itself is going to help a lot, because HTML has really been web-driven. So that's going to help a lot of the designers. But right now, web designers are still on a big learning curve working in a print environment.
Another big splash is the role of PR in this.
We'll use social media. I mean, again, that's like a free, especially because magazines do try to hit, I was going to say a millennial audience, but that's just not true anymore. I mean, Facebook, the age above is the highest growing group on Facebook. But using those outlets before your launch, like well before your launch, also kind of builds up the anticipation. And so we definitely did that and tried to set goals for how many followers we wanted at certain points, and then used Instagram influencers to also be excited about our launch and sent them like t-shirts or product or merch. So then they were posting about it, and so then it would just explode from, you have an Instagram influencer who has like 100,000 followers posting about your magazine. Suddenly, that's just feeding it to you, and you don't even have a magazine yet. So that definitely helped us for the launch. And we also threw a party that, looking back on it, was probably too expensive in terms of like knowing how to spend your money. But it did help kind of this community that was super excited about the launch. It felt flat to not have a way of bringing everyone together and celebrating, and that did help us initially.
I don't think that was too expensive. I don't know what you spent, but I think that's a great idea to get the core of your community together in a space. I think that's a brilliant idea.
At least for the first issue.
Yeah, maybe more often than that. Who knows? I mean, it builds, I mean, the loyalty of those 100 people. You can build a business on that.
Yeah, my regional clients do events constantly, and that's a big piece of their business. And it's a great way to especially kick off any special issue that they're planning on launching. We did it with a recipe book in Pittsburgh. They were giving out their annual chef awards, and by the way, here's our recipe book, and it's coming, and it's going to be at Barnes & Noble on Tuesday. Go get it.
I would say be emphatically who you are. Think of the most outrageous thing you want to say and say it in the first issue. Set a marker out there. I've historically used surveys a ton to determine cell lines, but it took me about 3 years when we started doing it to realize that what we shouldn't be doing is testing cell lines that don't raise our own adrenaline levels. So we stopped testing things that we didn't find exciting, and the cell lines got a lot better. We still identified the dogs, but we didn't end up producing a cover that really didn't quite represent who we were, which was death to whatever brand it was, whether, it was any of the brands. It could have been any of them. But I think being emphatically who you are and faithful to the audience in that way so they know who's showing up, and making aggressive statements about your identity, that's how you stand out. And I think it's important.
Does anyone remember that National Lampoon cover? It's a picture of a dog with a guns to its head, and it says, "Buy this magazine or we'll shoot this dog." I mean, I think it's one of the most fantastic covers ever. Very campy.
Maybe the best ever.
Perhaps the best cover. And I know it was just a huge success and very controversial. That's not going to fit for everybody's audience.
Dog fancy.
Yeah. That's now Dogster.
Right, Dogster, right, sorry.
But to me, that's also making a splash. If you're going to go after that type of core audience. I mean, Maxim, I think their very first issue had the tagline, "How to Pick Up Chicks at a Funeral." And they sold out because of that one tagline.
Emphatically who they are.
That was, but then they were never, unfortunately, they didn't hold up to, as you said, they didn't keep the bar.
Yeah, then they got mushy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this comes before launch, but make sure your concept is unique. So it actually, it's not going to fall flat out the door because it's like, well, you and 10, 15 others have done this before. So if it's a super unique concept, which we felt we had with Jarry, being there wasn't a food magazine for the gay community before. And what the response we got from most people was, I can't believe that this doesn't already exist. At the same time as us, a few others had the same idea. So we launched, months in between, but luckily all of our magazines touch very different subjects within that realm. But if the concept is really unique, then it's almost like you do less convincing and more just telling people what you plan on working on, and they get excited because it doesn't exist already.
Doc, how are we on time? 3 minutes. So any questions we have?
Real quick, in y'all's opinion, in y'all's experience, do y'all think there is a marketing problem with line extensions really between websites and what you post and the magazine itself? So does the posting on the website take away from the magazine, and does the magazine really take away from the website? We all want to have a website for our magazine, of course, but how do you solve that problem?
I can tell you that my model for 15 years has been to meet people on the internet and monetize those relationships with physical experiences, either print magazines or events or whatever. I have not ever monetized digital traffic successfully. I mean, there's dribs and drabs of money. But you meet people who are passionate about the same things you're passionate about on the internet, and then you can parlay those relationships into monetizable relationships. That's just my experience, but it's almost 100% of the brands I've ever worked on over the last 15 years have worked to one degree or another that way.
I've seen success where somebody may take a medical magazine, for instance. They might discuss a surgical procedure in the magazine, and then you can go to the website and actually watch the procedure. I think that's a good use of, pulling a couple of the multimedias together, as opposed to just regurgitating your content from the magazine onto the web.
There's a magazine about surgical procedures?
About 2,000.
Really?
Yes,
Wow.
I'll get you one.
Great.
We take all our content and it eventually goes online, and it's all really about the phone. It's all about mobility, and what they want from the web is information. They just want to get informed fast. They don't want to sit there and read anything in depth necessarily. They just want to find out what are the great restaurants in Savannah, what are the great restaurants in Charleston, whatever. What musician do I need to be listening to? But they go to the magazine to be entertained and to be inspired. So ultimately, you just kind of, it's like, I don't know, it's like Pong, if you remember that game. You're holding on to your content and you're putting it in the print product, and then eventually you let go of it and you put it out into the world, and you kind of slap back and forth. So you get the music video with the guy you wrote about and you throw it online.
They don't remember Pong, Marshal.
Yeah, I know.
For them, it's ironic.
And at Jarry, we only put out a magazine out every 6 months. So we see the digital world, like either social media or our website or our newsletter that goes out about once a week, as a way just to keep in touch. So it's not regurgitating the same content, it's keeping someone engaged for 6 months. Or the print book, we'd love to print a book that's 300 pages long, because a lot of our content could easily fill 300 pages. So we print a portion of the story, and then we continue the story either with other subjects or just continue it online, either through our newsletter or social media. So every time you're shooting something, rather than shoot something else for the digital world, which gets really expensive, you have one shoot, print a portion of it, and then continue from the same assets to fill your digital spaces.
To expand off what you originally did.
Yeah, so it's like one supporting the other versus like you're having one cannibalize the other.
Plus, if you get into a legacy media business that has thousands of pages of legacy content, start chunking that stuff up and using it to generate traffic, because it's a gold mine.
You can do a lot with e-newsletters too.
Huge.
Take your content, throw it into emails.
Yeah.
I think that wraps it up for us.